मुझे लगता है कि क्योंकि ये पहला सत्र थोड़ा सा डिले हो गया तो लोग अपनी जो समय मिला है उससे भी कम बोल रहे हैं, और अच्छी बात है क्योंकि आगे चल करके जो कार्यक्रम है वो चलता रहेगा। ठीक सेंस में दो चीज़ें मुझे लगा है कि प्रभात भटनागर जी ने कहा, सेंस ऑफ हर्ट वाली जो बात उसको एक्चुअली, और जो अमेरिकन क्या कहते हैं अनुभव बता रहे थे कि लोग आते हैं जो विक्टिम ओरिजिनल विक्टिम के परिवार वाले थे, वो आकर के खड़े होकर के देखते हैं। आज के दिन मुझे लगता है कि हमारे यहाँ मीडिया ने उसको एक तरह से उभार दिया है, और मीडिया जिस तरह से एक विक्टिम की फैमिली को उछालती है, खास करके पॉलिटिकल जहाँ पर कोई पॉलिटिकल मृत्युदंड दिया गया है, तो वो भी कोशिश यही करते हैं कि एक्चुअली लोग चाहते हैं कि इनको मारा जाए। एंड आई थिंक दैट्स रियली प्रॉब्लमैटिक फॉर द रीजंस दैट यू मेंशन्ड। क्लास डायमेंशन की जो बात कही वो भी बिल्कुल सही है। क्लास के साथ हम हाशिए पर जो हैं उनको भी जोड़ें तो देखें उन्हीं को, जो अगर आप एक सूची बनाएं और उसकी एनालिसिस करें तो आपको दिखेंगे कि कुछ लोग मारे जाते हैं, कुछ लोग को मृत्युदंड दिया जाता है और कुछ बच जाते हैं उससे। तो और अब मैं मनोज मित्ता जी को बुलाती हूँ। और
Thank you, Professor Chakravarti. Let me begin by telling you that I couldn't agree with you more about this observation you made, blaming the media for being part of the problem. We are a vital part of what Professor Patnaik described as a culture of cruelty. It makes, in our eyes, a great copy to go to the victims and instigate them. It's not just in the context of political crimes, which you mentioned. It could also be in the context of, say, sexual offences. Not too long ago, we all were witness to how journalists, whether from the print media or television media, would repeatedly go to the family members of the victim who has become familiar to us as Nirbhaya or Damini or whatever. So they would keep asking. And they would put the parents in a situation where the parents would be under pressure, would be obliged to say, and this would become a measure of expressing their love for their child, for their lost child. But if you did not love her enough, only then would you say, okay, I don't mind the victims not being given death sentence. So you corner them into saying, yes, that's the way you express your love for your child. So this is the role that media has been playing. So I would urge that when we are discussing the pros and cons of death penalty, it's not just all these arguments that all the eminent speakers before me have mentioned that we should be thinking about, because there is a larger context in which this debate is taking place. This battle has to be fought. The context being outside this hall, the context being outside the few of us who believe that death sentence should go. The context is that we are today, in the run-up to elections, and the consensus in the media again is that this is going to be something of a cakewalk for a certain formation, a certain ideology, which is a right-wing ideology, which has a very clear delineated position on death sentence, whether it is again in the context of political offences or sexual offences. They are very emphatic that death is the most appropriate penalty. And this view has taken root not just in the political class, it is not just a constituency that is growing in the public, but there is also there are clear signs of it having creeped into an institution such as the Supreme Court, which has long been seen as an anti-majoritarian check. But not very long ago, in the Bhullar case, yes, today we are holding this discussion a day after Supreme Court intervened in the Bhullar case and stayed his execution. But then, just a few months prior to that, there was this bench which rejected his appeal and held that death is the most appropriate penalty for him. And the reason it gives is that when it comes to cases that are being labeled as terror cases, then issues such as delay in executing or delay in deciding his clemency applications would not apply. The moment something is labeled as terror. Now, I recall that soon after this judgment was delivered by a bench headed by Justice Singhvi, who incidentally was the same judge who on the last day of his tenure said that Section 377 IPC, the draconian ambit of 377 IPC should be restored. So you have again this commonality of this right-wing tendency, whether it is in the context of homosexuality or in the context of terror. It's no coincidence that it is the same Justice Singhvi. Now, what did Justice Singhvi say in Bhullar's context? That terror. So I have no hesitation in saying that death should apply, notwithstanding the delay, notwithstanding all these human rights arguments you are citing before me. Now, as a journalist, I recall that soon after that judgment was delivered, it was unusual for a party that appeared before the Supreme Court to speak to the media against the judgment which has been delivered. That too, when the judgment is in favor of what he has argued. I am talking about Mr. Anup Chaudhary, who was the special public prosecutor in the Bhullar case when it was first decided in, I think, 2004 or so. And that was a judgment which first upheld the death penalty. Now, it was a majority verdict. Now, the judge who dissented was Justice M.B. Shah. Now, in retrospect, in the year 2013, this man, Anup Chaudhary, was actually saying to me in an interview, and we published it in Times of India, that what the dissenting judge said was right. I mean, his rejection of all the arguments of the prosecution was right. And I'm saying this with a clear conscience, is what Anup Chaudhary was saying. And he went on to give very compelling reasons. He said, look, this is how the system functions, that we just called it a terror case, and that was enough to pull wool over the eyes of judges. That was enough to persuade them to decide the case in a certain manner. They were unwilling to look at some very solid arguments that were put forward by the defense counsel, who I think was Nithya Ramakrishnan, who pointed out, for instance, that the confession that this man made was retracted by him. Now, the police did not, since it was labeled as terror, the police did not bother to gather any corroborative evidence. This Anup Chaudhary was pointing out that that confession was a narrative of how they committed that crime. Now, it contains details like how he stayed in a certain hotel. Now, when those details have come on record through this confessional statement, why is it that the police did not even bother to go and check whether this man did indeed stay in that hotel? They should have taken the trouble of producing some witness from that hotel so that even if this man retracted, there was some corroborative evidence on record. Now, such are the lacunae in evidence that Justice M.B. Shah, the dissenting judge, pointed out, and he said that this is not fit for death at all. It has to be, in fact, he did not even say it has to be life. He went on to acquit the man, and which was another reason why this man's conscience was pricking, the special public prosecutor, and he felt compelled to make his own confession to the media, where he said that it was not just the Supreme Court, when it was deciding this matter in the first instance, but when the president was exercising the clemency power. Of course, this interview took place before the Supreme Court, before, soon after the Supreme Court, soon after the president decided to reject the clemency. So he said this: how could the president, how could the government have ignored the fact that a sitting Supreme Court judge, in fact, he happened to be the presiding judge of that bench, the senior-most judge of that bench, not only rejected the plea for death penalty, he acquitted that man, and in spite of that acquittal, the Supreme Court, the president goes on to reject his clemency petition and says that he should be given death penalty. Now, the question that this special public prosecutor was raising was, does that mean that our government thinks that an acquittal order by a Supreme Court judge is meaningless in the eyes of the president? Should that not have been a reason for the government to feel that, okay, even if the minority judge's view on the guilt or innocence of the person will not prevail, surely it should play a major role in deciding the nature of the penalty, whether the death penalty should be commuted to life or not. Surely, when a sitting judge of the Supreme Court is saying that this man is innocent, that should have been reason enough for, if not the Supreme Court, at least the president, while exercising the clemency power, to say that this does not fit the description of the rarest of rare cases. Now, such is the shoddiness with which this whole issue of death penalty is being handled by the Supreme Court and by the president while exercising their respective jurisdictions. So now, this being the manner in which this authority is being exercised, my apprehension, and this is something that we all should apply our minds to, is that this tendency is going to escalate. It's going to strengthen with the kind of ideology that has been spreading, which apparently is finding increasingly takers across the country, across several sections, by default or for whatever reason. Now, if what is being suggested by so many psephologists does turn out to be true, you can be sure that this debate we are having on whether death penalty should go, this assumption we are making that the recent judgment of the Supreme Court laying down guidelines on the exercise of clemency authority will pave the way for the abolition, the ultimate abolition of death penalty. All these assumptions we are making may prove to be completely misplaced. If the elections throw up the kind of results that the psephologists are predicting, then you can be sure that this is going to be all the more entrenched. This ideology of death penalty, this belief that this is what is the most appropriate penalty, that this is the most deterrent, or this is the retributive approach will take very firm root. And there are any number of moral arguments they also fling at us. Yes, I mean, the lady who happens to be currently the leader of opposition in Lok Sabha was on record a year or two ago, in fact more than on one occasion, saying for rape, forget for murder, even for rape, the penalty should be death. So she was actually suggesting that there should be an amendment in the other direction. So if people of that mindset are going to be occupying or returning to office, so that's a situation that we should all be conscious of, and we should come up with arguments that address this moral construct that they are coming up with to justify the retention of death penalty. With these words, I don't want to, I'd like to end my. Thank you.